Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of True Scary Stories with your host, The Creepy Fox. Tonight, join me for this very special holiday edition of stories with some Thanksgiving stories that are going to chill you to the bone. Speaking of special, I want to go ahead and give a very special thank you and welcome to Swamp Dweller, who joined me on today's episode. You'll hear his voice a little bit later in today's video. Also, make sure to subscribe to his YouTube channel by visiting the link in the description below. He's a very close friend of mine here on YouTube, and if you're like myself who enjoys some scary stories, then you're going to enjoy what he has on his channel too. But alrighty then, with that, let's go ahead and jump into today's edition of True Scary Stories. Hope you enjoy. All for pumpkin pie. This occurred on Thanksgiving of 2002. For some context, I'm female, and I was 19. I had just started working at a Mary Callender's as a cashier, and had only been with the restaurant for less than a week. Thanksgiving was actually my second day on the job. Yes, unfortunately, newbies like myself didn't get the holidays off for at least a year. I didn't even get the double pay either, but a job was a job. On the second day of work, Thanksgiving, I was shadowed by a fellow coworker, who we're going to call Natalie. Natalie is the sweetest woman you would ever know. She is a retired Army veteran who had been working with Mary Callender's for almost 10 years at the point of this story. I still talk to her, even all these years later. At any rate, after an hour or two of Natalie shadowing and helping me, she left me be. Fast forward to around noon and a man mid-40s walks into the packed restaurant. I had noticed him right away because of the way he spoke to the hostess at the front, which we're just a few feet away from. He raised his voice and told her to be quiet as he started to walk in my direction toward the pies. I prayed he'd continue, and I thought perhaps he was with one of the other families already eating, but he gets in line, right next to a few customers. Great. After 2 customers and seeing him visibly upset over something, my fellow coworker Natalie calls over the next guest, an elderly woman in her early 70s. I was stuck with this man, who seriously could have used some anger management. Putting my best smile, I say, "Hello, next in line." "Hi sir, how can I help you on this fine Thanksgiving afternoon?" He looks at me as if I was from another planet, before finally speaking up after 10 seconds of awkward staring. "Do you guys still have pumpkin pie? I'll take 3, please." I was stuck with giving him the unfortunate news that we had just run out of pumpkin pies an hour earlier. His face went as red as a chili pepper. "How can you already be out of pumpkin pie? It's Thanksgiving. Shouldn't you be well stocked with what customers want?" he shouted as he started to bang on the countertop, which caused the elderly woman next to him to get frightened. "Sir, calm down. I'm sorry, but we're all out. We have other pies in case you're interested." Telling him to calm down was one of the worst mistakes I'd ever made. That's what set him off. This man began yelling obscenities and even pushed a display of cooking magazines and bags of coffee, which fell to the floor below. Natalie, with her 10 years of customer service experience as well as her Army training, tells me to grab the manager as she tries to de-escalate the situation. I felt bad for leaving Natalie to it, but I was a nervous wreck. This was my first job after all, and I didn't want to make any mistakes. I got into the back room and I told my manager there was a customer who was becoming violent. He gets up from his office chair, and we start walking back to the front, where the man is just getting up from the floor. A bunch of guests were watching him, and this was when he tells Natalie he would be back for revenge, to just wait and see. My manager wasn't even able to say anything to the man, but does ask Natalie and even some of the customers what had happened. What Natalie retells us was chilling. She says that the angry man actually tried jumping over the front counter to grab her, but another customer that was behind him manages to grab him and then pushes him back. The crazed man then tries punching this customer who helped Natalie, but he's able to dodge him and then punches him right in the temple. The crazed man fell, and was a bit out of it, and we had just happened to see the last part of him getting up, saying he'd be back, and leaving in what was perhaps embarrassment. Now, if you think the story is over, and you thought that was pretty scary, it only gets worse. So much so, that the police were involved. Fast forward about 4 hours later, and we had put the situation behind us, and I just clocked out, excited to get home to my family. I bid a farewell to my co-workers and began walking toward the front entrance. This was when I bumped into a family friend, a police officer who my dad was friends with ever since they were kids. He was here with another police officer, and they had come to pick up some pies for the potluck they'd be having back at the station. We ended up talking for approximately 10 minutes, and suddenly we were interrupted by a woman. "Excuse me, officers, but I just saw a man in the parking lot. He had a knife, and he put it into his sweater. I thought he was a bit suspicious." The officers asked the woman where she had seen him, and just as she's about to point him out in the crowd of people, we see him turn the corner of the building, walking in the direction of the Mary Calendars, and indeed he has a knife in his hands. I recognized him. He was the same man from earlier, the one who claimed he'd be back for revenge. I'd mentioned this to the officers, and this is when my friend says to the man, "Put the knife on the ground." He immediately drops the knife, and then kicks it in the direction of the officers. They then slowly approached him, and went in for the arrest without any further struggle. That was pretty much it. I went back home 30 minutes later, a bit shooken up, but happy that justice was served. So that was the time I worked on Thanksgiving, and had a very scary encounter with a revengeful customer. I haven't had anything as remotely crazy as this happen to me again.
This happened back in 2010 on Thanksgiving. For reference, I am a male, and I was 20 years old and had transferred to a university in Northern California to pursue a degree in parks and recreation. This was the first time in my young life I had ever been away from my family for the holidays, so it was a bit different. However, it was not all that bad. I had my roommates and some other friends I had met, and we decided on having a potluck at our dorm. Now, what should have been an evening of fun, food, and games would start off with something quite bizarre. You see, before we began dinner, which was being prepared by my roommate Damien and his girlfriend Samantha, I wanted to go for a run around campus. Hands up for those listening who like to work out before huge meals. Anyway, hopefully it is not just me and I'm not some weirdo. Anyways, the sun had just set over the horizon when I put on my running shoes and advised my friends I would be back in about 45 minutes or so. I proceed to head down the flight of stairs. We were on the 3rd floor of the dorm, by the way, and I began heading north, toward the other side of the campus. Now when I got there, I proceeded to do 2 laps around the entire school. In total, it took me about 30 minutes, a little faster than I expected. The last 10 minutes were a cool down. Now remember, I crossed the street, since our university is in the middle of downtown, and I walked over to a convenience store. I recall my friend Damien asking if I could go and pick up some extra plastic cups and plates. I give him a call, and he asked if I could also bring some napkins. I agreed, and I make the quick purchases. But here's when things would change. When I exit the convenience store, and I am waiting at the streetlight, enjoying the nice quiet evening, I get approached from my left. I looked for just a moment, and it was just a homeless man. I assumed he was going to ask me for money, and I was even prepared to hand him $2 of change I had left over, to spread some positivity and support. But I went cold when the man leaned in my ear and gave me the creepiest voice I'd ever heard. "Give me your wallet and your phone. Don't make any sudden movements." I remember standing there, thinking, was this some sort of joke? But then I saw it. I looked down for a moment, and I could see a sharp object. A knife. My fight or flight response immediately took into effect, but I tried to play it cool, since he is literally within lunging distance. Okay, let me grab them. Give me a second. The man lets out a chuckle and tells me not to make any sudden movements again, before backing up ever so slightly, presumably to allow me to reach into my pockets and give him my phone and wallet. This distance, which might have been maybe 4 or 5 inches, was enough of a distance where I felt comfortable in running and trying to get away from him. Just so you know, I have no idea how fast this man is. I have always been a runner myself, but you just never know. In one quick motion, I hurled a bag of cups, napkins, and plates right at his face, and with this distraction, booked it across the street. Mind you, the signal to cross had not come just yet, and there were cars still driving through the intersection. Man, looking back, I always despised how long that thing took. Anyways, I did not get hit, thank goodness. I might have angered some drivers, but hey, at least it beats being mugged. I continued toward the campus and looked back for a moment. I see the homeless man standing at the streetlight with the look of defeat. We had this 5-second stare down before finally he put his hands in his pockets and turned to walk in the other direction. I felt a sigh of relief come over me, but I was not safe yet. I booked it all the way back to the dorm, which required a fob key to enter the building, and it's not until I was in the lobby that I could finally catch my breath. A couple of students who had just gotten off the elevator saw me and asked what was wrong, and why I looked pale as a ghost. I told them what happened, and they agreed I had experienced something profoundly disturbing. Eventually, I caught my breath, and I called the campus police so that I could provide them with details of what had just occurred. They told me they would get into contact with the police department, but I never found out if they ever caught the guy or not. By the way, the entire campus sent out a text message telling students to remain in lockdown, but it was lifted half an hour later. I am still not sure if they ever caught the guy or not. I surely didn't see him again, and there doesn't seem to be any more reports of people being mugged. As for the paper plates, cups, and napkins, we ended up getting some from our neighbors. The rest of the evening went by as normal, albeit with quite a scare.
Thanksgiving Chase. This occurred 3 Thanksgivings ago, when I had volunteered at my local homeless shelter to help with serving food. I know it's kind of difficult to do today because of, well, you know. But I highly recommend once things get better and states open up, you give it a try. There's just something so rewarding about helping the homeless. A feeling of satisfaction. Seeing the gratitude on those people's faces, that really makes your day. It's just a shame that I had to go through what happened after I volunteered. So after roughly 4 hours of helping out at the shelter, I ended up leaving and start making my way back home. I live roughly a 20-minute walk from my house, and as you'd expect, I ended up walking to save gas. I never had a problem with walking at night. In fact, some would say the town I live in is pretty safe. There's never word of crime, and a lot of kids play in the neighborhoods, even into the late hours. Anyways, to get home, I have to walk in a park right behind the homeless shelter, which then shoots me out to the next street. There are some businesses such as a pharmacy, gas station, fast food, etc. Right behind that are neighborhoods, and a few blocks later, it's my home. As I'm making my walk in the park, admiring the sounds of crickets chirping and owls hooting, I started to notice I was being followed. The reason I say I noticed is because I passed by a park bench, and there was a man sitting there looking at his phone, who then got up and started to follow me. Now I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe he was also leaving. But just in case, I reached into my purse and grabbed my pepper spray from my key ring. I continued to walk for another minute, and I looked back only to see the man is still keeping up. "Hey, you dropped your wallet. Here, take it," he said in a drunken tone, as my eyes once again met his. I knew at this point he was up to no good. I didn't bring my wallet, so what purpose did he have in lying? All I had was my purse, which has a water bottle, keys with pepper spray, which I currently held in my fist, and my ID with some cash. Realizing his antics, I decided to continue walking, and that's when he speaks up again, telling me I dropped my wallet. I now started transitioning into a full-on sprint, and I could hear him do the same. "Get back here. You're only making this worse," he said out of breath, when what I see sends me into a full-on panic mode. There, grasped in his hands, is a knife. I started to scream and I yelled like a little kid, booking it across the street toward the pharmacy, where I got the attention of a customer, who I found out is a security guard. He goes outside to check up on the stranger, but he returns to me saying he's long gone, and there's not much he can do. I thanked him for his help, as another woman customer is helping comfort me over what was perhaps one of the scarier things I'd ever gone through. After a few minutes, I regained my composure, and I called my friend Evan to come and pick me up, even though I was less than 5 minutes from home. I was still paranoid. Evan ended up dropping me off, and I proceeded to tell my mom and dad about what happened. They didn't believe me at first, but when they saw how visibly shaken I had become the further I went into the story, the more they started to feel sympathy. I don't know whether or not the guy was arrested or even found, since I was supposed to get a call back from officers. But here we are today. I believe the guy might have been drunk because of the way he spoke and the way in which he was running and acting. My advice to all of you: it doesn't matter if you live in a safe area. There's always that one individual who might be out on the prowl. So please, be careful. Thanksgiving Stalker. So where do I begin? Oh yes, 2 years ago. I had just gotten out of work and was going to make my way over to my grandma's house, where my whole family was waiting for me. However, before I could get into my Mini Cooper, my mom called and asked if I could go pick up some extra sodas at Stater Brothers. I agreed. I drove over to the shopping center that was adjacent to where my work is. I went in, grabbed the sodas, and as I walked down the aisle of chips, I remembered something important. It was my little cousin Amber's 7th birthday, and I had no gift for her. I thought of making a quick stop to the toy store, but I was already running late. Therefore, I figured I would just get her a card and some money. So I checked out, and then I walked over to the Bank of America a few buildings over, so I could go grab some cash. Now, the shopping center, although packed to the brim earlier in the evening, was radio silent now, with just a few people here and there. This made the already quiet night, with a light rain just beginning to fall, that much more peaceful. Too bad, things were going to take a turn for the worse. When I reached the ATM machine, a woman had just finished making a transaction and greets me with a friendly smile and a hello. I wished her a good evening, and she goes about her night as I take her place and insert my card. I stood there for a solid 20 seconds wondering how much money I should get for Amber. Ultimately, I decided on $40. As soon as I push the button to start the transaction, I hear footsteps behind me, getting louder and louder. I didn't really pay attention to them since people do need to get money, but then I turned around, and that's when I saw him. "Oh, hello, Erica. Happy Thanksgiving." I cringed at who I just bumped into. It's this man in his 50s who I know. He was a customer who always showed up to my work and would flirt with me, even though I had to keep telling him I had a boyfriend and that I wasn't interested in going out with him. Sadly, my manager never did anything. I'm still not sure why. "So, you use Bank of America too, huh? Isn't that funny?" I found nothing funny about the situation. That's why I tried to walk past him, but he jumps in front of me and asks me where I was going, and if I had any plans for the evening. Clearly infuriated, I proceed to tell him it's none of his business, and if he's got nothing better to do, then to leave me alone because I needed to get going. I honestly thought he would get the idea, but instead I hear his footsteps keeping up pace. Oh great, here we go again. "Look, dude, I've already told you multiple times. I'm not interested in going out with you. If you don't stop, I'm going to call the police because I've had enough of your stalking." This seems to work, if not only for a brief 20 to 30 seconds, as he walks off into the parking lot and gets into his truck. Once I'm in my vehicle, I start to make my way to the exit of the parking area, but I get cut off by, you already guessed it, my stalker. I flipped him off and then floored it on the gas as I passed the yellow street light at the corner, hoping the red signal would get him to stop. The dude storms past the red light like it's nothing, and he's approaching me. It's at this moment I'm starting to have a nervous breakdown. But don't worry. Unlike most people in these situations where you hear their story and yell at them for not getting the cops involved, I made sure to do so. You see, I start driving in the direction of the police station, which was roughly a 3-minute drive away. This was where I was hoping I could have got him caught in the act. Now, let me just note, this dude was not letting up. It's as if this night was the one where he snapped and he decided he would go for broke. But what was perhaps the most scariest part of the chase was that he actually tried to bump the back of my vehicle. It's as if he was attempting the pit maneuver. With it raining, you can just put it in your head it was an accident waiting to happen. Luckily, he seemed to back off for a brief moment, but as I sighed a breath of relief, he did something even crazier. He speeds up, almost hitting oncoming traffic on the opposite side of the street where I'm at, and then he hits the brakes where he had blocked my way further up ahead the road. This forces me to hit my brakes, and I struggle to regain control of my car as it begins to swerve. I count my lucky stars my vehicle didn't flip over or I didn't hit him, because this would have really ended badly. Anyways, at this point a couple of other vehicles stopped to check up on me, and this stalker of mine, realizing his chances of getting me have pretty much dwindled away, suddenly takes off and disappears further down the road. Not only was I frozen with fear, but I was filled with so much anger. Why did it have to happen to me? What had I done to deserve this? Clearly, I had done nothing. And it wasn't until the police got to me that I broke down and started to cry. I gave the police a statement, as well as a description of my stalker and the vehicle. And thank goodness he had sent me a friend request on Facebook a week or so earlier, because with this information, police were able to identify and locate him. I did file a restraining order, and it was placed against him pretty much immediately. I'm happy to say I have never seen him again, and I hope it stays that way. So, here we are 2 years later, approaching Thanksgiving and the anniversary of this creepy incident. If there's any advice I can give to any of you, it's that don't be afraid to speak up and say something. I know a lot of times we have that mentality of not wanting to be annoying or be labeled a drama queen, but when your senses are telling you there's danger, you best listen, and you best act before it escalates to something like what I went through. Thanks for listening, and I hope this gets into one of your Creepy Fox podcast videos. Take care, friends. Thanksgiving Burglar. This took place in 2016. For a little information, I'm male, and I live in a duplex owned by a family friend, and still live there as I write this out to you. I'm on the first floor, and a young couple lives above me. Now, our duplex is on the outskirts of the city, where the nearest neighbors are about 1/4 of a mile away. This means we rarely get any foot traffic. Now, when this happened, the couple living above me was away for the week visiting family. This is important since during this series of events, I thought perhaps I might have been seeing them, but as you're going to find out, that's far from the truth. On the Sunday night before Thanksgiving, as I was returning from work, about a 30-minute drive from the city, I pulled up to the duplex and my car's headlights shine upon a hooded figure just beginning to walk behind my building. Our duplex is next to some woods, by the way, and during hunting months it's not surprising to hear activity. Even I use it on occasion. However, I did find it a bit odd that someone was sneaking around my property, since we do have a fence separating us from said woods. So I grabbed my pistol and a flashlight from the glove compartment, and then proceeded to run on over to where I had seen the individual. The only glimpse of the stranger I see is their back, as they are near my fence, and just beginning to jump over it. I ended up chasing after them, yelling for them to stop, but I just saw them run into the woods and disappear into the darkness. This put me a bit on the edge, since less than a minute later, I heard the sound of a car engine and then tires against dirt. That noise disappearing soon after. Now, where I live in Middle America, most people like myself rely on self-defense when it comes to situations such as these. Sure, you could call the police, but as the nearest police station was at least a 30-minute drive away, I'm pretty much on my own. I decided not to call officers, but I was a bit on the edge that night, constantly looking out my window with my Remington shotgun never leaving my side. Fast forward to Thanksgiving evening, after eating dinner with my girlfriend. We were in the bedroom with all the lights off in the duplex, laying in bed and watching the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special on TV. It was roughly 9:30 p.m., and all the turkey from earlier is starting to make us sleepy. My girlfriend fell asleep about halfway through the show, and I continued to watch the TV until the show was done at 10 p.m. This was the point in the night that I got up to grab myself a glass of water, as well as to go use the restroom. Now, my restroom has a little window that overlooks the backyard. However, the glass is blurred, meaning you can't really see anything unless you open it. What you can see, however, is light, specifically the back porch light. I became aware of this because right as I entered the restroom, the light turned on, illuminating the room. We do get wildlife, and at first I thought that might have been the case. But then I heard and saw it, scratching, and a shadow figure. I got the chills and immediately booked it over to my room, where my poor girlfriend got awoken by my sudden outburst. "He almost gave me a heart attack. What's wrong?" she said in her drowsy state. I told her to keep her voice down as I reached under the bed and grabbed my shotgun. I then walked over to the window in our room to ensure it was locked, which it was. "Honey, I think there's someone outside. Whatever you do, don't open the door unless I tell you to." I could see her start to get scared, so I gave her my grandfather's 1911 for reassurance so she could feel a bit more safer. My girlfriend then closed the bedroom door behind me as I began to look out the windows in her living space. I checked the restroom once again, but the automatic porch light had been turned off. I then looked through the kitchen window and the living room window, but nothing. I remember starting to breathe a sigh of relief and telling myself it was my overimagination making me believe I was seeing things. However, what happens next reassures me there was something wrong. "Dave, he's outside the window," my girlfriend screamed as she comes running down the hallway and into my arms. "Who's outside the window?" I replied to her as I can see her visibly shaking. "I don't know, but I can hear someone trying to open it." What happens next is my girlfriend following me as I sprint across the hallway and into my bedroom. I have a shotgun, and my girlfriend has a pistol. "Whoever's outside, you have 5 seconds to leave before I blast you into oblivion." The sounds of scratching and my window being tampered with went silent, but that didn't stop me from opening the curtain. On the other side of the glass was someone wearing a balaclava with one of the largest machetes I'd ever seen before. Though I couldn't see his facial details, what I could see were this individual's eyes. They went wide with the sight of the shotgun, and almost like a flip of a switch, the person stepped back, did a 180, and then runs toward the fence, again just like before, disappearing into the woods. This time, I called the cops, but just like I mentioned earlier, they didn't show up until 30 to 40 minutes later. Sadly, all the police found were tire tracks in the woods, but something they and myself did see were that the window screens in my bedroom and the restroom were cut apart. Whoever this individual was, they seemed determined to hit my house. But here's the strange bit. Ever since that night, no one matching their description has ever shown up to my property again. I even talked to the upstairs neighbors when they returned, and they never heard or saw anyone matching my description. So, it still remains unsolved all these years later. As an update, the landlord installed a security system on the duplex, and all the locks on the doors were changed. My advice to all of you: make sure you're prepared. If you have access to self-defense, take it into consideration. It might just save you. Also, to that person who tried to break into my home, next time you show up, if you ever decide to, you might not end up so lucky. So watch out. Avoid stopping at lonely gas stations. This happened last year when my wife and I were driving up to visit my parents from Florida up to North Carolina for Thanksgiving. Although we contemplated on flying, my wife insisted we drive so that she could take pictures for her Instagram. She's sort of a photo junkie, if you will. But that's not really important, other than explaining as to why we drove. Now, this scary story involves my wife. I was part of it, but she was the one who experienced it firsthand. Therefore, I'm going to jump between perspectives, but I'll make sure to let you know so you don't get lost. Continuing on. It was approaching dusk. I would estimate about 20 minutes of sunlight left, and my wife had the strong urge to stop and use the restroom. I asked her if she could hold it in for another 30 minutes since the next town was coming up, but she wasn't having any of it. She showed me on her phone's GPS there was a gas station in about 5 miles and demanded I stop. I agreed, since admittedly I was starting to get the tinkles. We ended up stopping at a gas station at the side of the highway, and it was completely deserted. There was one other vehicle, most likely belonging to the cashier, but just including ourselves, it's empty. My wife and I make our way in and greet the friendly gas station clerk, an older man in his late 50s. My wife goes into the restroom first, and once she's out, she tells me she would go and wait in the car. Looking back on the situation, my wife regrets not waiting in the little convenience store with myself and the clerk. But then again, I wouldn't be writing this story to you if she didn't. Now here's the part of the story where I'm going to switch over to my wife's perspective. Bear in mind, this was all in the span of less than 5 minutes. So my wife tells me she returned to her vehicle and takes a seat, turning on the radio and munching on some Chex Mix that she had purchased. My wife then began looking at her phone, being distracted by all the silly memes she has on Instagram. Then suddenly she was startled and spooked by knocking on the window. She first thought it was me and let out a laugh, but when she looks up, she gets the shock of a lifetime. Staring right back at her wasn't her friendly teddy bear of a husband, ready to surprise her with some more candies and sweets, but instead, a dirty, disheveled man who's in ripped-up clothing, giving her one of the creepiest smiles that she can ever recall. "Do you happen to have a cigarette on you?" the man asked, his voice being muffled through the glass window as he continued to stare my wife up and down. "No, I don't. They're not good for you anyways," she replied, hoping he'd get the idea and leave. The man continued to awkwardly stand there, and my wife at this point is starting to get a bit uncomfortable, but she doesn't want to jump to conclusions. First, she makes sure the doors are locked, which they are. She then lets out a breath of relief, since there was no way he could get in. My wife then tells me that the man started whispering something to himself and circling the vehicle. All the while, I'm still in the restroom, unaware of what's happening. After a minute, the man walks away, and it seems it's over. But then about 15 to 20 seconds later, he returns with another man, similar look and all. Now my wife is starting to sweat bullets. Here's when she gets on the phone and calls me. This is the first time I became aware of her predicament. "Can you get out here? There's two guys. They're trying to open the doors." Now here's the part where we make another jump and go back to my perspective. Not being able to finish my business, I get up, not getting a chance to zip up my pants until I'm just about to exit the building. And that's when I see them. Two men trying to pry open the car doors. In the loudest, most intimidating voice I could muster up. I had a sore throat at the time, I should add. I yelled the best combination of phrases I thought would be intimidating enough to chase them away. I would repeat them here, but let's try to keep things PG. The man took one look at me, face filled with anger and rage, ready to pounce like a lion, and they all of a sudden booked it across the street, until soon the darkness of the night had shrouded their presence. My wife, poor thing, was crying and shaking. I had to reassure her she was safe and that they weren't coming back. Now, what I hadn't realized, which my wife ended up telling me, was that one of the men had a switchblade in their hands and was trying his best to open the door. That thought chills me to the bone. What if they decided to go after me? It would have been 2 against 1, with the sharp blade being involved. It surely wasn't going to end pretty. At any rate, the clerk had come outside to check up on the noise, and we told him about the 2 suspicious men who were trying to break into our vehicle. He tells us this wasn't the first time he had seen them, and called the cops once, but they didn't do anything. We proceeded to ask him if he needed us to stay so he could call cops and rest assured these men didn't come back to try to do something to him, but he tells us he would be fine. "Don't worry about me. I got a shotgun under the front counter. If those guys try coming back and doing something, they're in for quite a surprise. You two get going." That was the end of that. He gave us some free snacks as to cheer up my wife, and we ended up driving to the next city over and got a hotel. My wife was still a bit paranoid, but after some well-needed sleep, she was better. Thanksgiving was uneventful, and we enjoyed some peace and quiet with the family. So, that's our story. The man with the dragon tattoo. This happened to me 2 Thanksgivings ago when I was working at a local supermarket. For quick reference, I was 20 years old. Now, during the holidays, I did get scheduled crazy shifts, but I liked it that way. It's also one of the reasons why I chose to work on Thanksgiving. Knowing my family, we never do anything on holidays, so I took advantage of the extra money. Anyways, I gotten off of work at around 6 p.m., and I began the 20-minute walk back home. I guess I should mention my car was in the shop, so I had to walk back. I wasn't using Uber since I had a bad experience with it, and I wasn't a fan of the bus either. I'm about 10 minutes into the walk when I stopped by an AM/PM gas station to pick up some munchies for the way back. I grab some Cheetos, a cherry Coca-Cola, and I make my way to the front counter to pay.
"Hey there, I can pay for those if you want."
I turn around and an average-looking middle-aged man walks up. He was, I'd say, 35 years of age. He was dressed in business casual, had black hair combed back with gel, large brown hipster glasses, a mole on his right cheek, and a dragon tattoo on his neck. "Oh, no, don't worry about it, sir. I appreciate the offer.
No, seriously. Let me buy those snacks for you.
I kept insisting, but so did he. And eventually I give in and he buys them. This should have just been a kind Thanksgiving gesture, but unfortunately, this was going to open up a series of very creepy events. As I'm thanking him, he begins wanting to know if I needed a drive back home. But here's the deal. How did he know that?
I just saw you walking. I assumed you didn't have a car.
Yeah, but I enjoy the exercise, so thank you. I go ahead and head out, but he stops me and he hands over a business card.
Call me sometime if you ever need work. I work for a talent agency, and I think you'd make a good fit. We're always in need for models.
The business card wasn't exactly what you would expect from a professional. It was literally a cheap piece of paper with a phone number. I put it into my pocket and then put one of my earphones back into my ear. Whatever, only 10 or so minutes until I get back to the house. Here's when things get creepy. Since I had been so focused on my music and my phone, I hadn't noticed that this red Toyota Camry was driving next to me, very ominously. It wasn't until I looked at the driver that I noticed it was the same man from the gas station, the one who had given me his business card. Funny part was when I looked at him, he just drove off not saying anything. I thought, whatever, just some random creep, but at the back of my mind I felt that something was definitely up. Fast forward to around 3 in the morning. By now my parents had been back from our family Thanksgiving party and I was up working on a drawing for school. I'd been at it for a solid 2 hours, and I decided ultimately I would head into the backyard to get some fresh air. So I put on some slippers and a jacket, and I tiptoe my way to the back as not to wake up my parents. And here's when things get even more creepy. You see, the back glass door is of a sliding nature. It's covered in large curtains, thus you're unable to see what might be waiting out there. I open them, and that's when I see someone in a hoodie about to put their hands on the door handle. That sight in itself was scary, but the knife he had in the other hand put the final nail in the coffin, so to speak. I stood there in disbelief as the man removes the hoodie, and now I was face to face with a creep from hours earlier. The guy was clearly out of it. I book it up to my parents' room. Meanwhile, I heard the guy trying to get in. My dad was furious. He grabs the pistol from the nightstand and he does an entire sweep of the property, but he was gone. And when police came to take his statement, they told me they would keep a lookout. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I had shredded the piece of paper he had given me that had the phone number. So, there went that evidence. I mean, I wasn't thinking I would see him again, which, spoiler alert, I never did. Just as soon as he had come into my life, he had left, and I'm not sure where he is now. So to all my fellow listeners out there, if a 35-year-old looking man with slicked comb black hair, business casual clothing with glasses, a mole in his right cheek, and a dragon tattoo on the side of his neck offers to buy you snacks or food, just ignore him and leave right away. Also, if he hands you some sort of business card, it might just be the same dude. I just hope he has moved on from his days of being a creep. Black Friday madness. Thanksgiving should be a time when you're with your family, stuffing yourself with amazing food, and having a break from all the madness. However, a few years ago, I chose to handle things a little bit differently. Now that I was 26 years old and lived on my own, I wanted to do some Black Friday shopping. It's funny because I always criticized the people who did that. I always thought, wow, how stupid could you be when all they do is just raise the prices a couple of weeks or so before, and then lower it just a bit from its original price. But nonetheless, there I was at Best Buy, looking to get my hands on a $250 40-inch 4K television. When I arrived at 11 a.m. Thanksgiving morning, there were already about 40 or so people waiting in a separate line from the store. As the morning turned to evening, more people started to wait in line until 6 p.m., when the early Black Friday sale began. In groups of 20, we entered the store and were allowed to purchase what it was we came for. You should have seen how crazy the people that were waiting in line with me went. They rushed to all the electronics like a lion running for a zebra. Admittedly, I did the same thing, and I go to pick out a TV, which turned out to be the last of its kind. I remember putting my hands on the television box, unaware of my surroundings. I start to make my way to the cashier, when all of a sudden, someone yells at me. "Hey, isn't that a 40-inch 4K TV? That one's mine." "Sorry, sir, but no one ever told me this TV was saved." "No, I saw it first. Now hand it over." What happens next is an argument that started to become physical. Now, I work in retail myself, and I knew right away it wasn't worth the risk as this guy was getting very aggressive. Thankfully, a couple of security guards come up and they eventually side with me, choosing to escort the disruptive man out of the store. I honestly thought that was going to be the last time I would see him. Anyways, a bit spooked by this guy saying he would kill me, I pay for the TV, put it into a shopping cart, and began to make my way out of the store and to the parking lot. I should mention that it was already dark and my car was all the way at the very end of the parking lot. As I started to make my way closer and closer to my vehicle, I see someone step out of theirs. It was the same man who was giving me a hassle in Best Buy. "Hand over the television, and there won't be any issues." I froze right there and then, because I saw the dude had a revolver. I put my hands up and slowly started to back up as he takes the shopping cart from me and heads to his truck. Again, I knew this wasn't worth my life, so instead of fighting him, I take my phone out and take a picture of his license plate. I then run up to the store where I felt a lot more safe around people. Security told me they would call law enforcement, and when they got there, myself and a few other witnesses gave our testimony. A couple of days later, the man is identified and he's arrested on various charges, including robbery with a deadly weapon. It also turned out he had just recently been let out of jail. So much from changing his life around. As for the television, I was able to get a brand new one. So, thank you, Best Buy. And thank you, police. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you did, make sure to leave a thumbs up for me. Make sure to leave a comment telling me what you all thought. And if you haven't already done so, make sure to hit the subscribe button and make sure to hit the bell beside it. And also make sure to have it set to receive all notifications instead of personalized. That way all of you will be notified of every and all future uploads here on my Creepy Fox YouTube channel. I want to give a very special thank you to Swamp Dweller who ended up joining me on today's episode. If you guys have not checked out his YouTube channel, you can find the link in the description below. He's a fellow Scary Stories narrator just like myself who uploads a bunch of awesome scary stories. So if you're in the mood for some more stories, then make sure to check out the link in the description below. And make sure to tell him that Caesar, the Creepy Fox, sent you. I also want to give a very special thank you to my good friend Brianna. She was the one who helped me out with the footage. If you guys want to go ahead and email her, make sure to do so. She's always looking to help out people looking for either stock pictures or stock images. You can email her using the email briannagracejames@gmail.com. You can also find it down in the description below. Also, make sure to tell her that Caesar the Creepy Fox sent you if you are looking for footage, stock images, or maybe even some advice when it comes to photos and videos. She's really knowledgeable with that, and she can definitely help you out. And of course, I want to give a very special thank you to the channel members who have been supporting me. Honestly, if it wasn't for all of you guys, I probably would not be able to, do a lot of these little things that I've been doing when it comes to, providing you guys with videos, providing you guys with animation, which, by the way, there is a new animation in the works. It will be out sometime in December, right before Christmas time. That's going to be really awesome. But, thank you to channel members. You guys are great. You guys are awesome. And I really appreciate your support. Oh, by the way, before I forget, I keep mentioning it in every video, but I can't express how important it is If you guys have a scary story that you'd like to share, you guys can do so using my user submissions email, tcfnarrations@gmail.com. Again, that's tcfnarrations@gmail.com. I hate having to keep doing this every single video, but I can't express enough that the reason why there hasn't been as many uploads, the reason why there hasn't been, really, really long videos is again because people aren't really sending in stories. People used to send in stories all the time. People aren't sending as many stories now. So again, if you have some time and you'd like to share a scary story with me so we can feature it on a future episode, make sure to do that. That way I can get you guys, some more videos. But speaking of user submissions, we do have stories for Christmas. We do have stories for New Year's. So guaranteed, you're going to be getting 2 more holiday editions of Scary Stories, Christmas and New Year's. So expect those sometime during December. As for other topics, other stories, again, it's just going to depend on what stories I get and what people share with me. But if you guys still have suggestions, again, make sure to leave it in the comments below. And if people send in those types of stories, then we can go ahead and cover them. Because I know the one that people really, really want to see are deep web stories. I've been getting a lot of comments. But I have to keep telling people, again, I can't do certain topics unless there are stories for that. If there aren't stories, it's like they don't come out of thin air. So again, if you have a story, make sure to share it and make sure to send it in. But okay, I promised myself this wasn't going to be a long outro, so I'm going to try and keep it short. Again, just very special thank you to everybody who watches the videos. Whether you just found my channel yesterday or you've been watching me since 2017, a very special thank you to every single one of you. I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for all of you. But until then, everybody, I've been the Creepy Fox. You guys have been awesome. And I will hopefully catch you guys on the next episode of Scary Stories. I still don't know what the topic's going to be or what it's going to be in general, but I'm sure it's going to be awesome. But until then, guys, take care. Have yourselves an amazing day.